Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. Before we kick off this week's episode, just a quick ask. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to make sure that you never miss an episode, never miss out on any of the strategies and tactics that we're sharing to help you continue charting your own path to freedom. And if you'd like to go deeper with any of this, we've launched a free Facebook group, which you can join at pathtofreedom.com/group. And we've linked that in the show notes to make it easy for you to find. All right. Thank you again for being here. Let's drop in to the episode. Hey, what's up, everyone? And welcome back to the Path to Freedom podcast. Today, I'm joined by Mickie Kennedy, who is the founder of eReleases. Mickie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Been looking forward to chatting with you a little bit. So you're in the PR business.
Correct. I run and operate eReleases press release distribution and been doing that for about 26 years.
Okay. So tell us a little bit more about the business and you know what your kind of specialty is, because PR is kind of a broad category, I guess you could say, and I know you guys are a little more specialized.
Yeah. So our emphasis in PR is press releases and distributing press releases. All of our releases go out nationally over PR Newswire. Normally, this would cost you $1,600 to move a press release nationally through them. With us, it's probably about a third of the price. So there's a huge savings there. We do about a little over 10,000 releases a year.
Oh, wow.
And so we're able to pass our savings along to small businesses. And that is the caveat that we can't work with publicly traded companies or really large corporations that are like $100 billion a year or more. And so that's the pricing they gave us because they recognize that they don't reach out to small businesses and entrepreneurs and authors and franchisees and people like that. So it's a way to serve that audience. And we do a lot of the editing and, putting the releases in shape for the wire.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So I guess that to me, that makes sense, right? Like a big million or billion-dollar company, getting press releases out is not really a challenge for them. It's not financially, it's not hard for them to have it in the budget. They can throw a lot of money at those types of things, but your typical small business, probably doesn't, generally speaking, have it in the budget to do something like a press release. Like that's kind of a luxury. So you've figured out a way to make it more affordable. And also it sounds like a lot easier for a small business owner to get a press release out.
Yeah, that's our real goal, is to just make it sort of easy for a small business or entrepreneur or startup to, move a press release and have it go out over the wire through PR Newswire.
Yeah.
And to tell people a little bit about what a wire is and why it's important is it's basically a place where journalists can go to get the news. It used to be broadcast through like satellite feeds and directly into newsrooms, and they'd be spitting out dot matrix prints of releases and stuff like that. But now it's all through the internet.
Sure.
And a journalist has a login and they can look at a customized feed that's their industry. And by customized, they can like exclude keywords. So if they cover fashion, but maybe they don't cover, retail fashion or JCPenney, they can, exclude certain brand names and keywords. So they're looking at more relevant feeds. And that is a very different situation than their email inbox, which is usually with off-targeted pitches and press releases, because the one thing that has exploded over the last couple of decades is media databases. And so for $8,000 to $20,000 a year, you can license a media database, and people realize it doesn't cost extra to send to more. So golf club companies start sending to banking and financial analysts who only cover banking news, because in their mind, bankers and business people buy golf clubs. And so
it's a spray and pray type of strategy. Like, hey, the more lines in the water, the better. But then it clogs up all these journalists' inboxes and they just get tired of sorting through it.
Yeah, and the newswire, you select your industry, but it does get approved by them, and they make sure that they are appropriate for the industries, and so it's an area where it's very tailored and specialized, and so journalists really like it. And in the U.S., there's a duopoly of newswires. It's Business Wire and PR Newswire.
Mhm.
There's a third wire that sort of pivoted and said, we're just going to try to take publicly traded companies who are looking to meet SEC disclosure for the cheapest price, and that's Globe Newswire. And anybody else outside in that space are not newswires, even if they have wire and newswire in their name. They just aren't really reaching journalists. And so that's a big learning curve for people, because there are places out there with wire in their name that charge as little as $59 or $89, but they don't reach journalists, and you're not going to get media pickup as a result. And there are other types of wires that people are probably familiar with, like AP Wire, Associated Press, Reuters, United Press International, and they do not transmit press releases. They will accept a press release, but what they transmit are articles written by them, and they make their money by licensing those articles to news outlets. And so if you read at your local paper, and sometimes it'll say AP or Reuters in front of it, it
Mhm.
means rather than have their journalists write that article, it was just more
Okay.
economically feasible for them to just to take the article from the AP. They know it's quality, well written, and
Pay them a fee to be able to
right.
publish it in their publication. Yeah, interesting. I'd never really understood how. So if you put out a wire or a press release through like PR Wire or what was the other one you said?
Business Wire and PR
Wire.
Newswire are the two. Yeah.
So then is the hope that relevant journalists will see that press release, pick it up and write an article about it themselves for their publication? Are they able to just use the exact press release, or is that just kind of giving them the basic information they would need to then go and put together their own article?
Right. So generally, the press release is building blocks for a journalist to write their own article. You'll never see the Wall Street Journal or the big guys like the Washington Post copy and paste a press release. It's very important that what they write, they own the copyright to, and they don't own the copyright to the press release. It's just open, for anybody to take.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so, if they were to transmit that, it starts getting into a wiggle room of can we protect our articles and things like that? And more importantly, there's a style that different news outlets have, and they sort
Sure.
of follow. And most press releases aren't written to that format. That being said, there are scenarios where people write a press release like an article. And we call
Okay.
those sort of feature articles. As long as you are aware that none of the big companies will ever pick it up, and are fine with that, you can transmit it. It is true that a lot of small newspapers might copy and paste it if it's a pre-written article. The caveat is you can't get a byline. You won't be the author of it. Again, it's submitted as a press release, so it's open for anybody to use. But it's ideally promoting your company or mentioning your company within that article. And small newspapers looking for content will obviously consider something like that. But outside of that, those feature articles don't do very well. So it is generally what we're looking for is what we call earned media. And that's where you transmit a press release. The journalist transforms it by writing an article using that press release, and maybe they get details on your website or even call you for additional information to sort of put together that article.
We'll get right back to the episode in just a minute, but if you've been considering business ownership, if you're already a business owner looking to expand and you're curious about franchising, I'd love to connect with you, answer any initial questions that you have, talk about a specific franchise, and detail the exact process that I use and have taken hundreds of people through to help them understand franchise ownership, find the right franchise for them, and conduct the necessary due diligence. Click the link in the show notes if you'd like to schedule a free, no obligation strategy call. I look forward to talking with you. And now back to the episode. Yeah, that's interesting. And I imagine these days, most of the publications that or most of the articles that a journalist would put out are going to be in more of an online format than print. I mean, I'm sure there's still some print, but I imagine the big emphasis is on digital.
Yes, and because of that, one of the ways in which you can sort of help your press release stand out is you're given the option of uploading a couple of images.
Uh-huh.
Um, don't waste it to upload your logo. I can't remember the last website I've seen where a big logo was included. It's not usually. What I would do is I would upload two images that maybe have the product or service, or maybe it's someone, at the company. The ones that work best are usually someone using your product, if it's a product, or someone
Mhm.
in a work environment, maybe at a computer for a service, or somebody who exemplifies someone that it would be a customer. And the candid shots work better. What you have in your pocket will work adequately fine. It used to be that everybody wanted professional photographs, and they had to be like stock photo quality. And what people interact with best on the internet today are ones that seem real
Yeah.
and credible. And so the candid shot is going to give you a lot more benefit than one done by a professional photographer with the really, $5,000 lenses and
Yeah.
things like that. So that's a really good thing. I think it's helped sort of democratize media opportunities, because you really don't have to spend a lot of money on the images that you use, and you also don't have to spend a lot of money having the perfectly tailored written press release. My first book that I wrote over 15 years ago was about writing the perfect press release, and I really felt that the better the press release was written, the more likely you're going to picked up. And the truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter. The newswire used to be so adherent to AP style, and now they're very loose with it. And so which is good. You don't have to be perfect, and also you're not going to be penalized if you make a mistake in a press release. The newswire does review them, but not as carefully as they used to, because they don't care. But the average stuff in Microsoft Word that checks for grammar is probably adequate.
Probably good enough.
And also feel free to lean on AI. The end product is an article that the journalist writes, and what you're writing is a press release for the media. When it does get replicated on websites, we call that syndication, where it shows up in Yahoo Finance and a few other places. That generally happens with all press releases. And it's certainly nothing to be excited about. It's just something that has always been done, mostly to meet disclosure requirements with the SEC. So they sort of treat all releases get these places, and that's why most of them are financial related, like Yahoo Finance and stuff like that. But what we're ultimately looking for is that earned media, and those syndicated ones have no follow tags, and the wire, the search engines know not to really give them a lot of benefit as a result of that. So we really are looking for the journalist to transform it into an article. So if you have to lean on AI to write it, then feel free to do that. These aren't like really polished pieces. They're really just the building blocks
Kind of a rough
answering.
draft.
Yeah, they just answer the who, what, when, where, how, and why, and you're going to lead with the most important, the most newsworthy element, and sort of work from the most important downward, sort of inverted pyramid style is what they call it. And but the one thing I would never do to AI is have AI choose what to write about. AI has been trained on the world of press releases that are out there, and the sad reality is 97% of press releases do not get earned media. And so if you lean on AI, it's going to give you the same press release that you see your competitors use and everybody else use. And most of those aren't getting media pickup. And so what I try to do is get people to focus on the 3% of releases that do get picked up, because there's lots of patterns within those. And the most important one, I think, is have a story, have the building blocks for a story arc in your press release. And, what I mean by that is we get a lot of product launch press releases. It's probably one of the most popular ones outside of maybe a personnel hire. And both of those are not great press releases for journalists, mostly because the product launch should be newsworthy and important, but they're usually written by, here's our new product, here's a list of features, here's a page to learn more and buy. And for journalists liking to have a story arc, there's no story there.
There's no meat on the
And
bone for them to run with and turn it into a story. Yeah.
right. But one of the easy things you can do is, inject a data point like, hey, we have a logistics software solution, and 67% of the people who enter the transportation industry fail within the first 5 years because they don't achieve profitability. And our product helps to smooth out actual cost and give you a path to being able to price more intelligently and be able to lead to profitability. And it's like, okay, so you just showed the stakes of why it's important. And then to even, enhance that is put a use case study. This company was losing 7% a year, and they were in their third year of service, and they started using our product. And after 90 days, it looks like they're going to achieve a net profit this year of 5%, and then have a quote by them talking about, like, we kept thinking if we just kept tweaking every little thing in our business, we'd achieve profitability. But this software has easily shown us the path to profitability and to make predictable what was chaos before. Some really great quote like that a journalist can incorporate into a story arc and say,
Yeah.
hey, here's a new product, here's someone who actually used it and had this transformative experience, and here's a quote by them, and here's some information where you can learn more about the features. And so that really fulfills more of what a journalist is looking for. Journalist is basically a gatekeeper, and they have to decide that anything they let through to their audience is going to entertain or educate them, or ideally both. And a general product launch release as we get them really doesn't do the job. And so anytime you're releasing something to the media, it's important to you. How can you make it important to a journalist's readers or their audience? And sort of try to reverse engineer it by getting them to have a story that they get involved with. Maybe sharing your own story. That's another great aspect
Yeah.
that a lot of people don't realize, is your story is probably one of the most valuable things about you. It's unique to you. It is one of the things that everybody who appears on Shark Tank, they open with their story. They often share, like, hey, I was laid off and my dad had died the year before, and we used to make this thing, and I just thought, could there be a business there? And it's something that gets us involved. It's a human interest element. It's very natural for us to care, and we want to care, and we want to relate to
Yep.
other people. We don't relate to logos and business
Yeah.
names and stuff like that. So incorporate stuff like that into your story. And I know that for a lot of small businesses, they try to appear extremely corporate. And I think being professional is important, but also sharing some of those vulnerabilities, those obstacles,
Yeah.
those things that, give you authenticity and inspire other people is a really great way to stand out. And it really does break through, and it gets a journalist to care about you and want to sort of share that experience with their readers. I had one client who had a very embarrassing story where they basically canceled Thanksgiving one year because they had gotten inundated with orders, and they didn't have anybody to really send them out, and so they were stuffing boxes on Thanksgiving, the whole extended family. And I told them we should incorporate that into a press release,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they were resistant, but we did. And then they got a 2-page spread in Inc. magazine, and that was the entry
Wow.
to it,
Yeah.
saying, hey, this is where they started and this is where they are now. And they just didn't understand why people would care about that. And I said, because the readers are other business owners, and we've all had setbacks and obstacles, and we also know that the family suffers through the entrepreneurial experience at times, and often they'll come in and help and pitch in. And this was one of those things, and it made so many people immediately identify with that and also sort of care with you. And we love it that you're no longer in that position, that you've
Yeah.
grown, matured, you have a warehouse and employees that to handle shipping and stuff like that. But at one point you were there, and the truth is that many people reading that article are either there or going to be there one day.
Yeah. Yeah. Story. I mean, there's no question. Stories are what's going to resonate with people. I mean, just based on my experience, and I think it humanizes you in the eyes of the reader or the listener. It makes you more relatable, and I think there's just kind of been this shift to where most consumers would rather know that they're doing business with like actual people, not some, big faceless corporation. Or, these days, so often if you get text messages, phone calls, chat boxes, like so much of it's driven by bots and AI. And I think people are just like, it's kind of refreshing to be like, oh, damn, that's clearly a human that's got like a human story, and it's going to catch their attention a lot more. And I think that's probably the hardest thing in this day and age with any format of marketing, advertising, press releases, is just getting and keeping people's attention, because there are just so many opportunities for us to get distracted, and decide where we want to place our attention. um so it sounds like, because that was an interesting stat that you gave, that 97% of press releases that go out through the wires don't get earned media, meaning a journalist does not actually pick it up and say, hey, I'm going to rework this and publish it in my publication. Because that was a question I was going to ask you, right? Is like, as a small business owner, if I'm considering making the investment in a press release, I think you said that through your firm, it's $1,600 to
No,
go out.
it's about $349 for
Oh,
our
okay.
new customer
Oh,
special.
you said it's
Uh,
normally 600, 1,600 or something like that.
right. If
Okay.
you went directly to PR Newswire, you'd pay over $1,600
Gotcha.
for the
Okay.
same
Correction, guys.
distribution.
Mickey does not charge $1,600. He's got much better pricing than that for you. But regardless, I mean, it's not a huge dollar amount, but still, I was going to ask, like, do you have any guarantee, or do you have any predictability in terms of how many journalists would actually pick it up? It sounds like there's no guarantee, and if I were to just kind of decide to go put out a press release on my own, very high likelihood I end up in that 97% of press releases where nobody really looks at it, nobody picks it up, nobody really cares. And you mentioned kind of some patterns of those three. And I know the first one is kind of tell stories. What are some of the other best practices or themes that you see in these 3% of press releases that do get the earned media?
Right. So, yeah, just sort of speaking about what I guarantee is, of course, we don't guarantee media pickup, but I do have a free masterclass that goes through the types of press releases that do get picked up, the 3% that do. And what I say is, if you do a PR campaign of 6 to 8 releases following that, and you don't get media pickup, my guarantee is we'll send future releases for free until you do get earned media. Never had anybody that didn't get earned media. As a matter of fact, one of the ideas in that masterclass has never failed in getting usually between 6 to 14 articles.
Wow.
Just with one press release. And
Wow.
so anybody interested in that class is completely free. It's less than an hour long video. It's mostly going to be you doing an audit of your business through the lens of this. And it's at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN. And let me just start out with the one release that never fails, and that is to do a industry survey. And you're going to ask questions of your industry, and ideally, you're going to pick things that are very topical right now. It might be the industry's perception of how AI is going to influence it. It could be like we're way out of the pandemic, but people have changed their allegiance to businesses, and a lot of people want a better work-life balance and want to work from home or a hybrid situation. And is that creating work culture issues for you? You might ask questions around that. And there's also going to be specific questions that are going on right in your industry that are very specific. And the best place to get those is just to ask around. Ask people on LinkedIn that are in your industry. Ask if you go to a conference or trade show, what are the things you're begging to ask other people? Like, hey, have you noticed that people aren't paying as fast as they used to? And we get a lot of people who have turned net 30 into like net 90. And they're like, yeah, I've noticed that as well. It's like, that could be a harbinger that money's drying up either in your industry or nationwide or
Mm-hmm.
globally. And so, pick a few questions. I like 4 questions per page on something like SurveyMonkey. So we're looking at 8 questions, 12. The most I generally recommend 16. And the great thing about 4 per page is if they stop 2/3 of the way or half the way, you've got half their responses. And
Yeah. Yeah.
ideally, you've weighted the most important questions that you feel are the most important questions in the beginning.
Yeah.
And you take that link and then you just approach an independent or small a trade association in your industry. And you're going to have to do research because most people don't know these because everybody knows the big trade association or two, but nobody knows these smaller ones. And what you're looking for are ones that their member base is very similar to your business. And do that research. I had someone once scold me saying, well, that won't work for us, Mickie, in the PR industry because there's only Public Relations Society of America. I had to break it to this person that there's over 470 other trade associations in the PR arena in the United States alone. Some of them are very small and esoteric, like Florida based or mid Atlantic, but there are some that are like, PR firms that are 50 employees or less. That would be perfect. That's probably most PR firms. And to be honest, anybody speaking for the big giant PR firms, you can't trust what they're saying, or that's really how, the principals of the company truly feel. Pick one. The memberships are usually 600 members to a few thousand. If it's much smaller than that, I would be hesitant. But I just approach them and say, hey, I had this survey I put together. Here's a link to it. Could you send this to your members in exchange for that? I will mention you in a press release I'll be issuing over PR Newswire in the coming weeks. And most of these associations, because nobody knows about them, see this as an opportunity for them to get some potential media attention as well. And about 2/3 of the time, the first one we approach agrees to do it or counters back with, can we co-brand the survey or get more involved in a way? And as long as it doesn't take you off the path, I have no problem with that. In some cases, I think even co-branding the survey as between a partnership of you and them actually maybe even gives you more credibility.
Yeah, I could see that.
And because these associations are smaller, the people that make it up are generally more passionate. And when they get a request to go complete a survey, they're more likely to do it than the big giant associations and things like that.
What's
And again,
the
go ahead.
No, sorry. What's the best way to find these associations relevant to your industry? Like if you're not already familiar with them or a part
So
of
I
them.
have not found a master database of associations.
Okay.
So I just generally do a
Google
Google
search.
search and I
Yeah.
type, my industry, like public relations associations, PR industry associations, publicity. I try different things, and I'll usually find a few roundups where someone will have 30 here or 30, and so I just sort of look between those, and I just figure out which one looks like it would have a good member base and which one looks like that member base is more like me than other ones.
Mm.
And the truth is you could actually even repeat the same survey to different audiences and
Sure.
release
Yeah.
different versions of the survey. But when you get the results, you're going to put all of the results on a page on your website. You're going to link to it in your press release, but the press release is predominantly going to focus on one or two questions most. You have all those other ones available, so a really great journalist will go through and see, is there some other angle I could do or other type of approach, and they'll be very appreciative of that. And they'll, if they write articles, again, you're going to get mentioned as the author of the survey. But you're going to focus on what you feel is the most surprising singular question or maybe two questions in that survey, and then you're going to explore that topic a little bit in the press release, and you're going to have an amazing quote where basically put in perspective why you feel the industry is feels this way on this particular subject. And you don't necessarily have to agree to it. If like 82% believe that AI is going to replace them in the next 5 years, you can say, hey, I think it's a bit alarmist that that many people feel this way. But I do think that in 5 years, those that don't know how to incorporate and use AI in their job are probably going to be at a severe disadvantage. And that also makes you seem very level headed.
Yeah.
You then take that and you send it out. And like I said, it's always generated earned media. The least I've ever had a client that followed this approach got 4 articles, and they were in the biometrics field. It's very specialized, so they
Yeah.
were very happy with even the 4 pickups. But generally, it is 8 to 14 articles. Maybe 6, but it's one that always works, and it takes a little bit of effort, but it's as straightforward as I said. You don't have to make it any more complicated than how I explained it. The most important part is to ask really good questions that people would want to know the answer to at this moment in time. And I think that, if you're in the graphic design business and you're like, well, what percentage of people in your industry actually believe that their job's going to be replaced in the next 5 years? That's an interesting,
Sure.
number that people
Yeah,
would
it's a
want to know.
question that's probably on everyone's mind that's involved in that industry, and I like that strategy a lot. I mean, you're kind of uh, not to like diminish it, but you're kind of using someone else's insight and energy to give you the bulk of your material that you're then going to turn around and put out through this press release, and then have. I mean, you're just kind of connecting dots, right? But getting the credit for
Right.
it. It's kind of brilliant.
Right. And also I think that press release, you're going to explore some of the emotions around that topic
Yeah.
and why people feel that way. So it does elevate you as a thought leader in the industry because you're, talking about a topic that obviously is very important to the industry and, giving some perspectives on it. And I think that that's a really great way to just sort of stand out and sort of, put the spotlight on yourself and make people care. And I also tell people that because this survey is going out to others in your industry, rather than looking at it as going out to your competitors, which I don't know why so many people worry about that.
Yeah.
Look at it as an opportunity to partner with people and work with them. So on SurveyMonkey in particular, on the final page when they're done, so many people just let it default back to SurveyMonkey. You can send them to a page on a website where you introduce yourself, tell them who you are, invite them to connect with you on LinkedIn or join a newsletter. This is an opportunity for you to maybe get 100 other people in your industry to know about you potentially.
Yeah.
If you're serving a particular audience and you're able to clarify that to them, maybe they're like, hey, we're always turning people away that we are looking for this, and now we have someone that we can certainly send those leads to. So you would be surprised what synergies exist just in the survey aspect of it, of networking with the people that have completed the survey.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Yeah, well, I'll have to put some thought into how I could apply this for my consulting business. And like I do a lot of on LinkedIn, and one of the things that's been most successful on LinkedIn in terms of getting engagement is not so much a survey, but we'll do kind of a poll, right? Where
Sure.
we put out a question, what was what's the number one thing that's held you back from really exploring franchise ownership, if it's something you've been thinking about, and then A, B, C, D, E, 5 different answers, options to answer. And then when we put that up over the course of a month or so, one of those answers, funding, unsure how I would fund it, was overwhelmingly the top answer that we got. So we did a webinar on how to fund a franchise. Like, we kind of use that to crowdsource, like, all right, what are the best topics for us to focus on? Like, what are the things that, and I think it's I mean, it was good insight for me, but it's also like just an easy way for someone to respond. Because they're in the way we did this poll is literally they typed one letter and hit send. They didn't have to type up a whole thing. These surveys are kind of like that. You have to read the questions and give your answers, but it's not super intrusive where someone's going to look at it and be like, I'll do that later, but they never get back to it.
Right. Yeah. And one of the things about surveys, in addition, is you can also have a field where they can just write their comments as well.
Hmm.
I had that work with one client who was he was an auto repair shop in Pennsylvania, and their goal was they had a new domain name because the old one was tied to the Yellow Pages somehow. And when they sent Yellow Pages packing, their domain went with it. And so
Oh,
uh,
wow.
they had a new domain name. They were looking to get links from automotive trade publications, and I said I felt the best way was to do a survey, and it worked really well for them. But at the end of the page, so the last page, one of the questions we asked was, "What's the strangest thing someone left in their car while being repaired?" And it was an open field, And so there's no statistical relevance whatsoever to any
It's
of the
just pure entertainment.
responses. But yes, and it was entertaining. We put, like, I think it was around 20 in the press release, but linked to the entire questionnaire and all of the responses. And I think there was over 60 that we had curated, and it did extremely well. I mean, I think over half a dozen automotive trade publications covered it and linked to it.
Nice.
There was a couple more that covered it that didn't link to it, but that actually helps you still with SEO, because Google gives you an implied link when they can determine that the article is about you specifically, even though there's no link to you. And
Yeah.
they have a patent on that and everything. But a lot of people have said, "Hey, we got picked up in the New York Times, which almost never links to anybody, and we saw our SEO improve, but there's no links." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's an implied link, and obviously." Google has picked up on that and given you credit for it, and so that is interesting. But people really liked the responses. People. Someone left a boa constrictor. Someone left a relative in an urn that had to be retrieved for
Oh, jeez.
memorial after hours,
Wow.
and they had so it was just one of those things that did really well. They got picked up by their local newspaper and several other places as well. But it just sort of shows that people are naturally curious, and if you can
Yeah.
cultivate questions that gets that curiosity and strangeness and fun out, you can do really well with that.
Yeah. 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 Doesn't surprise me there were some entertaining answers. I worked for Enterprise Rent a Car for a couple years after college, and we would find some wild stuff that people left in cars when they returned their rental cars. So um, when one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and you just kind of mentioned this, like how big of an impact can doing this right, the right press release strategy so that you are picking up earned media, how much of it is going to help with SEO?
Right. So when you get earned media, it definitely helps with SEO, and the more you get, the better. And so if you put the time and energy into a survey one, and you do get, like, 6 to 14 media pickups, that's going to help you quite a bit. And again, surveys work really well for linking because a lot of them will link to you, especially if you make that page with all the questions and answers very rich with resources. Like maybe you have a quote about several of the different questions that aren't going to be on the press release. Maybe you create a little chart or infographic within that page. That makes it more likely that they're going to link to you. So all of that definitely helps you quite a bit. I had a client that, as far as like how much it can help, the wildest example I've seen. Well, there's been a couple, but one was um, it's our leading case study on our website, eReleases.com. And it was the dining bond initiative that was set up during the pandemic to help restaurants that were closed.
Mhm.
And they basically, with volunteers, if you nominated a favorite local restaurant and the volunteers were able to contact them, you would give money that would go directly to that restaurant and sort of help them out and be backed by what they called a dining bond. It's like a gift certificate scenario. And it was sort of modeled after the War Bond Initiative, was what they were
Mhm.
looking for. And it was promoted by PR completely. And one press release went out and it got over 100 articles. So extremely successful, and really great media pickup. The likes of CNN, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Forbes, Reuters, as well as Rob Report, James Beard Foundation, some food related ones, Wine and Spirits magazine, but dozens and dozens and dozens of daily newspapers across the US picked it up. We quit counting at 100 media pickups, and it was all promoted by one press release. And I
Wow.
think that it did so well because it was positive news at a time where there was uncertainty,
Yeah.
or even this negative outlook,
Yeah.
sent home for 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And then also it was actionable. You have your favorite restaurant, you and your spouse or someone went to on milestone events like holidays or Christmas or maybe even anniversaries, and you wanted to give some money to support them. It was something that, for a little bit of money you could do, and it made you feel good and sort of, felt like a member of the community when we're sort of being isolated and feeling alienated. And I think that's why it did so well. But, the real reason is because it was on the wire and it was available to everyone, and it felt a need. It felt a need of publications looking for positive news at that time and something that was actionable. And I think that that's why it did so well. Generated over $10 million in revenue. And so, I challenge
Wow.
anybody to take a release that would have cost $349 and say, oh yeah, we put $349 in and took over $10 million out. That's a really big ROI.
Yeah, I'd
And I
rinse
don't
and
know
repeat that one as often as I could. That's another question I was going to ask you is, because most small business owners, especially, and like I'm learning a ton from just talking to you about the PR side of thing. Like I have a pretty good grasp just through our own business ownership experience on digital marketing and even, some print advertising that we've done. And, you know, I don't know as much about PR, and I imagine a lot of small business owners fall into that same category. And as small business owners, we tend to be very, very focused on ROI, right? All right, if I
right.
invest this dollar in marketing, how many dollars in revenue can I expect to get back? What are what are realistic expectations? Obviously, I mean, just through examples and stories you've given today, it can be all over the board in terms of what you're going to get from a press release. And so much of it sounds like depends on, do you really know what you're doing with the press release and have a good strategy? But generally speaking, say someone goes into it with a, like, is there an ROI calculation that should be expected, or is a press release, is the ROI less tangible in the sense that, yeah, it can help with SEO, yeah, it can help with exposure, but you really shouldn't expect to be able to track like a dollar amount ROI to your press release efforts. I don't know if
Right.
that question makes sense or not. We'll get right back to the episode, but I wanted to quickly share a free resource with you. If you're curious about franchise ownership and want to learn more about how countless people, including myself, have leveraged franchising as a way to create more freedom for themselves and to take control of their livelihood, I've put together an ebook. It's called Franchise Wealth Creation, and it's the perfect starting point for anyone that's just curious to learn more about this whole franchise thing and how I've helped hundreds of other people navigate all the steps involved in understanding and researching franchising. So click the link in the show notes, fill out a short form. I'll send you the ebook. I think it's a great starting point if you're curious at all about learning more about franchising. All right, let's get back to the episode.
It does. So I think PR is very frustrating for a lot of traditional marketers because you
Yeah,
don't get a tracking URL that you could
right.
use. Even if you incorporate a tracking URL, they're just going to go to your website and pick the link. So you're not going to be able to track it purely. That being said, I tell people, look at your sales while you were generating earned media. Was it better that month? Than what you typically do. Maybe attribute some of that to the PR. In some cases, it's easy because in the case of the Dining Bond Initiative, it was only PR that they did. They did no paid advertising. It was all PR and word of
So
mouth as a
that's
result of
100%
that PR.
attributable to
Right.
that.
Right. And, I said another client that I also have to say is a huge success story. They were, I think, I want to say they were on the Gulf area of the United States, and they built waste management facilities, the whole thing. And they sent out a release, and I helped the guy send out his first release. His boss said, "Send out a press release." So we got it done. And then he called me up and said, "Hey, I'm probably going to get a raise out of this." He goes, "This landed in Waste Management magazine. That was the only real pickup we got." I was like, "Okay." And he goes, "But it turns out that was important because we got a call from somebody in Australia and said, could you like ship these over to Australia?" And they go, "Yeah, we ship globally,
Well,
all over. It's going to be on a boat for a few months, but it'll get there. And they ended up doing deals for 3 facilities that were, I think, in excess of 30 or $40 million. And so, it's just being on someone's radar.
right, yeah. It's if someone doesn't know you're there, I mean, it's yeah. I think like one of the, and that's why I wanted to ask that question, because I do think a lot of small business owners are in some cases probably overly focused on the ROI calculation, right? And wanting to be able to see a direct correlation between these marketing dollars invested and X amount of revenue generated. And like I know one of the things we've learned with our businesses, like one of our businesses is a high end custom pull out shelving and custom closet company, right? So we do a lot of outbound marketing and advertising. It's all about, it's not a product that's for everybody. Not everybody can afford it. And so, we have to know how to get in front of the right people with the right message through our marketing and advertising. And, we've just learned over the years that it's not always a nice, neat, pretty attribution model, and we do all the different tracking things with, unique URLs, unique landing pages, unique phone numbers. I mean, we have tracking capabilities built into all of this, but um, there's a journey that most of these customers have to go through, right? And usually it's multiple touch points. And so, if they uh, get a Val pack from us in the mail, that might be the starting point. Now we're on their radar, right? But Valpak doesn't get credit for that lead unless they call the phone number on Valpak or happen to, tell our person answering the phone that they saw us in Valpak. There's just and I've seen examples where, like in our ROI reports, a certain marketing vehicle wasn't generating a very good ROI for us, so we pulled it, and then sales just went down, and it was clear after a little bit of time of pulling that one thing, like even though people weren't maybe directly taking action based on that one advertising vehicle, it was supporting, it was a key part of the mix. So I think a more holistic view at, hey, what's the total amount I've invested in everything to promote my business, and if that ROI looks good, then you're probably doing something right. And so I can see where, an effective PR strategy could be a big part of a comprehensive marketing strategy for these small businesses. So a couple other things I'm curious about. What, like, in your mind, are there certain types of companies that press releases are going to work better for? Do you feel like press releases, if done correctly, can benefit any type of small business out there? What are your thoughts on that? You've mentioned, some product based companies. Like, what about companies that are more service based? Is there any companies that a press release may not make as much sense for?
Right. So there are certain industries that don't work very well, mostly because of limitations at the newswire. Stuff that makes health claims.
Yeah.
A lot of supplements don't do very well with PR. That they get suppressed or they can't go over the wire. Of course, people promoting NFTs and a lot of cryptocurrencies
Are
also don't
NFTs
do
even a
very.
thing still? I feel like that it's kind of fizzled out.
I hope so. I think
Yeah.
so.
I could never wrap my head around that one.
Right. But so those don't do extremely well, or they can't be sent over the wire at all. I think that it's something that if you're open to exploring and trying different approaches, I think it can work for most industries. I had a customer come to me. They are a carpet company in New Jersey, and they wanted to do a 1 year campaign with me. I told them I didn't think it was going to be very effective. And they said, "Well, we've got the budget. We could spend it with you or someone else." So I said, "Well, come
Let's
on
go.
in." And about a few months into it, nothing had happened. And I was like, let's brainstorm and try to come up with some more interesting ideas. And I asked them a series of questions that I had, and one of them was, "Who's your biggest enemy?" And it turns out it was the big box home improvement stores. And I just thought it'd be like Zeke across the street with Carpet Emporium, but no, it was the big box home improvement store. And they talked about how bad they are for the flooring industry and what an
Mhm.
inferior product experience they give customers. And he said that a lot of times they will go into a home that someone got their carpet at these big box home improvement stores, and it's like 7, 8 years ago, and so they're like, it didn't work with them, and they look at the carpet and the carpet's fine, but it looks terrible because it's puckered, it was never properly stretched. And they said that the truth is, if I tell this person that we could restretch it for them, it's going to be the same thing because they have to remove all the furniture from the house again so that we can come in and properly
What a
restretch
pain.
it. And he goes in, and then generally they don't use great pads, and the pads generally do wear out way more than like the better pads that most floor companies use. And but he says that it's just a shame, and also seams that are often showing because the person that comes and installs it may not have ever installed carpet before, because who they call when they have a job and they don't, they've exhausted the people that usually they call, is they just look at the home people who have a home improvement license in the state and start calling. And so
Yeah.
if you reach a roofer who's having a bad week and you say we've got 1,400 square feet to install tomorrow, he might just say sure and go to YouTube that night and try to figure it out. Yeah. So it is one of those things. So we put that together in a press release. It was sort of like a David versus Goliath approach, and
Yeah.
talked about how bad the big box home improvement stores are. And we got picked up in over 10 floor trade publications with that first press release.
Wow.
And what we had determined is there was a blind spot in their industry where every other carpet company in the United States that are all the subscribers to these floor trade publications, uh, they all share the same common enemy, and yet there's almost never any articles about that. And so we basically exposed that and put the spotlight on it and got lots of media attention. And we continue to exploit that. Sometimes they say lightning doesn't strike twice, but you try different approaches. So like, hey, one of the things they shared is this is how we market to people who are getting quotes from the big box home improvement stores. And we tell them about the restretching, and we tell them about the fact that the person that installed the carpet may have never installed carpet before, may not know how to make seams that don't show afterwards and things like that. And so again, at the end of the year, they had, I think, over 30 clips. And they taught me something, because I was like, a lot of the clips, they did get their local paper. They did get New Jersey Magazine, which is a high end consumer magazine. And they thought that was like perfect for them. But most of the other ones were trade publications that their customers never read. But they put
Yeah.
all the clips into a brag book, a big binder. And every time they went and gave someone a quote, they would say, hey, we may not come in the cheapest, but we've been around for
Oh, that's a
20
good
some
idea.
years. And they open the book and say, here we are. We've been, been featured nationally by Floor Trade Weekly, this place, that place. They said they basically just, increased their sales discussion by like a minute and just opened the book. No one
Yeah,
ever
that
read
makes
any of
perfect
the
sense.
articles.
I mean, it's instant credibility just seeing, hey, we've been featured in all these different publications, and if they do take the time to read like the headlines or whatever, like they're getting this message across too, but it's a little less salesy,
Right.
I guess,
And they,
because it's someone else saying it, right? It's not the
yeah,
salesperson in there saying, "Oh, we're better than the big box stores, and this is why."
it's
Um,
it's like social proof when a journalist writes about
yeah,
you. It's that instant authority
yeah,
and rapport. It's a huge signal of trust. And as a result of that, they said that every time they introduced that brag book, they converted 17% more of those experiences. So almost one out of
wow,
every consultation that they lost, they were now getting.
yeah,
Almost,
wow.
one out of five.
And I'll
And
tell you this,
that was a huge boon to their business.
in a business like that, you increase your conversion rate by 17%. That's gangbusters. That's like that is game changing for your
And
business.
and that's what happens. I mean, you get sales from earned media, you get leads from earned media, but sometimes you get the ability to take that same article, the link to it or screenshots of it, and share it with your leads, and
Sure.
you'll convert
Yeah.
more as a result of it. You get that and you share it with your customers. And again, it will reduce your churn rate, because the people who are thinking maybe we should look around this year and make sure we're using the right company and consider someone else, they'll see that. They'll get that signal of trust, that emotional response that usually happens when we read about someone and we're like, "Wow, good for them," and they won't shop around that year. So it's going to reduce your churn rate. So earned media is just really, really wonderful for a lot of different reasons. We work with about a third of the people that appear on Shark Tank. The producers recommend that they do a press release before their episode airs, and we get recommended directly by them.
Nice.
And what we find is a pattern that the ones that are very aggressive, the startups, will come back and do a lot of releases. Manscaped did, I think, over a dozen. Squatty Potty, I think, did over 20 press releases, and they got earned media. It helps they were on a national show, but they were also trying lots of different approaches, trying strategic types of releases and engaging. And what I found is that startups that usually are well funded usually start with PR before they turn on paid advertising, because once they have all the logos and all the links to articles about them and people are familiar with them, not just on Shark Tank but in these other publications, when they do cut on paid advertising, they will convert higher as a result of that.
Interesting.
And so
Yeah.
that's a pattern I've seen with a lot of them that come out of the Shark Tank experience. Is they focus on PR initially and build that base and then move on to the paid advertising.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I guess kind of the last big question I have for you, and you touched on this a little bit with everything you just shared, but what type of a cadence should a small business have when it comes to doing is this, I know you mentioned earlier someone wanted to do a 1 year campaign with you. I imagine one is better than none, right? But it's probably not the best strategy to say, hey, let's just do one of these and never really think about it. So how frequently do you recommend it? And then are there certain uh, things that may trigger a small business owner to say, hey, we should do a press release to let people know about this? I think you mentioned new hires and product releases as examples earlier, but how frequently and what are good occasions or reasons to do a press release?
Right. So I tell people that if you're going to consider PR, it makes more sense to do a PR campaign, which is usually 6 to 8 releases. You're going to want each one to be different. You're going to want them to be more strategic, as opposed to what you may consider milestones for your business. For example, the 10-year anniversary rarely works, outside of your local newspaper and
Nobody
stuff like
cares.
that.
I mean,
Yeah. And the personnel, the new hire, rarely works either. I tell people, save the money. Don't spend money to send that over the wire. Send that
especially if you end
person.
up having to fire them 6 months later, then it's a total
Right.
waste.
So take the image of the person, write a few sentences about them, send it to your local paper. There's usually an email address for on the move or personnel hire type coverage, especially in your business magazine or business newspaper. And maybe do the same thing with trade publications. Check and see if they have an on the move section, and you can just email it there for free. You don't have to write a press release, and save your money there. That being said, 6 to 8 releases and doing them strategically. What works for the business? What is usually what makes sense? I say if you can do it monthly, that's great. You can do it every other month, that's fine. The minimum is quarterly, because the one thing you do want to do is you want to be doing it frequently enough that you're staying on people's radar. Because sometimes it is that second, third, fourth, or fifth touch that they've seen you, that they now today have a break and are looking for something actively, and they're willing to invest in you. And so it is one of the things that as you do it, it gets easier to get media pickup. If you're doing strategic releases, you do 6 to 8 releases, you're going to see some of those generate earned media, and ideally make a difference for you. And each media pickup is different. So, I worked at a company when I got started and exposed to press releases, where we would do a press release and the phones would ring and we would generate sales. And other times we'd get media pickup like the Wall Street Journal, and we didn't get as many sales, but all of a sudden our boss knew that we could get more money in sponsorships and things like that we were doing. And so it does build on each other, and you just have to be open to the opportunities and give it a try, and test the different approaches. And so, if it takes you a year and a half to 2 years to do 6 to 8 releases quarterly, I say that's a really good approach, but you really want to put the effort in the same way that I tell people, most people know that when you do a Google ad campaign, you don't get 120 clicks and determine whether Google works based on what happened with those 120 visitors. You try different ads, you try different landing pages, you tweak the audiences, or the keywords and things like
Yeah,
that. And the same
yeah,
thing with PR.
that's a good
You've got to try
perspective.
it and tweak it and test it. But do the strategic types of releases. You'll have a much better experience, and you'll generate more media pickup, and find it a lot easier to get picked up. And when it comes to local media, I tell people, don't spend money to get local media pickup. If you're looking for that, you are the best person to go out there and get that. If you think about it, there's less than 10 people who in your local market would probably cover you. Find out
Mhm.
who they are, introduce yourself, and send them pitches, not press releases. You don't have to bother writing a whole press release for them. Just a few sentences or a couple of paragraphs, maybe an amazing quote, because a journalist can build a great article around an amazing quote. So by amazing, saying something very succinct or powerfully, or sometimes contrarian, or how it's you're a wordsmith and you said it creatively. But for people who aren't wordsmith, just saying something very condensed and focused is really a great way to sort of stand out. And I recommend, when you do tell them a few sentences about yourself, you go ahead and put a ready-made quote right in there, because they can
Mm.
envision the whole article around it. And look in your local paper who covers your industry predominantly, get their email address. These aren't celebrities. You're allowed to ask for their email address, and they should be willing to give it to you, because they're members of the community and they're supposed to cover local businesses. If you're lucky enough to have a business newspaper or a magazine, I think we still have both here in the Baltimore market. Find out who sort of covers your industry there, get their email address, and start pitching them. Introduce yourself as a local business and give them an idea. Look at what gets picked up in other markets. Like if you're ever at a trade show or conference and you're all locally based businesses, put them in your Google alerts, or or company name that you're familiar with. And as you see it in other markets, you say, "Hey, I wonder if that could work in our market." And you don't go to them and say, "Hey, I saw in Cleveland this company got picked up, and I'm the same company here in our local market. Cover me." They're not going to do that. But if you say, "Hey, I've noticed this trend of news media talking about this particular thing, like maybe it's like being environmentally green in the dry cleaning business, and I'd love to talk to you about how we achieve these goals in our market, and here's some of the other things we've done. Maybe here's a couple of images, photos that you have," and then put that amazing quote, and you can get picked up locally on your own without having to pay anybody. And as you make these connections, it just gets easier over time. And I have people that have done this for a couple of years, and they say after a while, the journalists just reach out to them when they're working on a story and looking for a local business just to plug in.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've seen a little bit of that in our area. All good advice, and so to make it clear to the listeners, with eReleases, your company, you guys not only are able to give much better pricing to someone that wants to do a press release, but you're also giving some guidance and doing some strategizing with them on, here are maybe some topics that would be good ideas. Here's the right type of framework. I mean, everything you've shared with us today in terms of best practices to be part of that 3% that gets picked up in earned media. That's what they're getting in addition to just a better price to put their press release out.
Right, absolutely. You've got someone on the ground who's watching the releases that are going out and seeing the ones that are getting picked up. And I have a very creative mind, so I'm always exploring for patterns and things that others can learn from and replicate. And
Yeah,
we
yeah.
take that and apply it for other people.
Sounds like a no-brainer to me if you're doing press. And I've learned a lot. Like I said, I wasn't really I've had some press releases done, for my businesses over the years. A lot of franchisors, part of what they do is they're launching a new franchisee as a press release. But, in my experience, it's never really moved the needle a whole lot. But I've learned a lot. But I think it's probably because it just wasn't done right. And it was like a one and done type of thing, right? Unless the franchisee had the foresight to say, hey, let's continue working, with this PR firm to do press releases on a regular basis. So like this has been very educational for me and opened my eyes. Cause I'll be totally honest. I'd kind of, if you would have told me yesterday, like, Wes, what do you think about doing a PR, a press release for your business? I'd be like, I mean, isn't that aren't we kind of moved on from that? But it does, it makes a ton of sense. And I do know a little bit about how SEO can really benefit from strategic press releases. So this was interesting, man. And it's definitely got my wheels turning a little bit about, how I could strategically incorporate press releases into our businesses, even my consulting business. I'm kind of thinking through some things that could be interesting to do. I love what you shared about the surveys. And anyways, ton of value here, and I think the listeners will really enjoy it as well. Give us the link one more time, and we'll post it in the show notes where people can go for that free masterclass. And then anywhere else you might want to point people if they're interested in learning more.
Sure. So my website's eReleases.com. All my social media is on the lower part of it, including my personal LinkedIn. It's a great place to touch base with me. You can interact with our editors. We don't have any salespeople by chat or phone or email. And we really help people, even if you have a press release you just want us to take a look at, even though you haven't placed an order with us yet. We'll do that free of charge. Just give us a couple business days to get back to you. We really want people to succeed. But that free masterclass, great place for anybody to start, because all of a sudden you're going to be working strategically and avoiding the traditional milestone releases that everybody else is doing and not getting picked up most of the time. And that's at ereleases.com/plan, PLAN. And again, it's completely free, and it's a small commitment. It's an hour-long video. It was originally like 8 hours, and I just realized that the last class I bought that was like several hours, I didn't finish it. So I was like, I've got to make this, understandable and break it down and be as succinct as possible. So I really feel like I've valued people's time, and it's a great way to just get in there and learn what you can in about an hour. And I guarantee you that you will have a better education after an hour than most people who work in PR firms, because I don't see them doing strategic releases. Usually I see them all focusing on closing the sale and doing a lot of other types of stuff in addition to the earned media. And my experience is that a lot of PR firms don't generate a lot of earned media for their clients.
Yeah. Well, this has been a masterclass this hour that we've just spent together, as far as I'm concerned. So people should definitely go and check out the actual masterclass. I definitely will. It's a small amount of your time to invest if this is the type of thing that can really move the needle in your business. And for those listening that maybe you're not a business owner yet, but that's something that you're working towards or aspiring to. These are really good things to know. Like, I thought it was fascinating when you pointed out that, a lot of these companies coming out of the Shark Tank are intentionally doing a lot of PR before they start spending money on paid advertising. Like, if I'm considering starting my own business, I'm taking note of that, because that's really interesting. But anyways, Mickie, thank you so much, man. We'll put all those links in the show notes to make it easy for people to find. But thank you for dropping in here on the Path to Freedom podcast with us and sharing all this insight. It was really interesting.
Oh, you're very welcome.